Next, we're going to talk about our pre-season setup. Spring is coming close, and you need to prepare yourself for running your planter operations. There are several things you need to do with the planter as well as with the Pro 1200 display to ensure that you have what we call work conditions prepared, as well as all of your growers, farms, fields that you're going to plant within, and all of your crop types and all of your products that you're going to actually apply into the field. First, let's take a look at setting up the planter relative to those pre-season elements. We will access the triple bar menu from the planter universal terminal. We will access the caliper for our pre-season setups. You'll see we have two selections here, which include work condition and liquid calibration, because my planter has liquid fertilizer. It's important that first we work through the work condition setups before liquid calibrations. When I access the work condition menu, you'll see that I already have pre-built 4 different work conditions for this particular planter. To select a work condition later in the field, you would click on the left on the white boxes. But right now, we're looking at doing an establishment or a creation of our work conditions before we go to the field. To do that, we need to click on the blue boxes on the right. It's important to understand what a work condition actually is. It's simply a recipe for what you're going to do in the field at a given time. For example, in my operation, I plant corn and soybeans. In addition, while I'm planting corn, sometimes I plant corn in the same population across the entire toolbar, and sometimes I perform seed plots where I need to apply populations per sectional drive. Those are different applications of planting corn. Likewise, sometimes I apply 28% nitrogen as a liquid fertilizer, and sometimes I apply 32% nitrogen as a fertilizer. Those are different aspects of planting corn. So I build different work conditions accordingly. So we will go through this setup so that you can see one created, as it's important to the operation. I'm going to click on the blue box adjacent to work condition 5, which is simply a default value to show the steps to proceed through. First, I need to modify the name. I'm going to access and click X to clear, and then I'm going to type in my name. It's important you give a very proper name so you can recall this easily when you come back pre-season. So let's, for example, say that we are going to create another corn work condition. And with that corn work condition, the discs that I'm going to use have 27 holes. When I'm planting that corn, I'm going to plant a population on the left side, and I'm going to plant a different population manually on the right side. So I am going to label this as left-right. And I often use liquid fertilizer with my corn applications, but in this situation I'm not going to, so I find it advantageous to say no liquid. Now that I have my name established properly, I need to set all my values correctly, such as I'm going to plant rate per side on the left and right, so I need to correlate per side here. Because I've said I'm going to establish rates per side, it does ask me for some default rates. Now you'll see later that these rates are often actually not used, but it is important to enter some common rates that you would use, such as 30,000 or 32,000 seeds per acre. It also allows me to set 2 different preset rates. So default manual 1 and manual 2. So maybe at a different situation, I want to run by default 28,000 and 35,000. As I mentioned, my corn discs have 27 holes, so I need to establish my holes per disc. And then click Next. When I'm planting corn with my left-right rates with my 27-hole disc, I need to establish what is the default vacuum and bulk fill rate that I'm going to utilize for the planter. It's very critical that you open your operator's manual for your planter and access the recommended settings chart. The recommended settings chart contains all the information you need to identify what vacuum rate, what bulk fill rate, and many other pieces of information for all crop types that could be run through this early riser planter. For example, for my application, it tells me to run in my recommended settings chart a vacuum rate of 20 inches of water. It also tells me to run a bulk fill rate of 3,500 revolutions per minute, not the default of 3,000 in the software. So please access your recommended settings chart to identify what rates are applicable for your planter and your crop type. Product delay we will leave at 0.05, which is the default for the machine, and that is acceptable to use for all starting with planting. Similar to seeding with liquid fertilizer, even though I'm not going to use liquid fertilizer in this application, it still does ask me about liquid fertilizer rates. I can leave the default values in here. When I actually go to apply product in the field, I simply won't turn on the liquid fertilizer control. At this time, we'll click Next. And finally, we have our row setup within the work condition. What this allows me to do is create custom planting applications if my situation desires. Typically, you're going to be using all rows on the planter, such as my case, 16. However, in certain applications, it may call for a very unique custom setup, such as if I wanted to make this into a 14-row planter, I could inactivate these 2 rows on the outsides if that's what I chose, and that would make those rows not drive, not plant, not do anything other than just be along for the ride. If I wanted to make a 14-row planter and also make my auto guidance work correctly, where I didn't leave row 1 and row 16 gaps in the field, if I turn to red, that is not only going to turn those rows off, but also now make my auto guidance act like a 14-row planter. Again, in most cases, for most applications, we will leave all rows active, which will make them all plants, and it will make my auto guidance act as if it's a 16-row planter. After we've completed our work condition setups, it's important to re-access our main menu and our caliper tab so that we can perform our liquid fertilizer calibrations. The liquid fertilizer calibrations need to be performed for each fertilizer type that you're going to be utilizing. In my case, if you recall, when I look at my work conditions, I was going to be using in one situation 28% nitrogen, another situation 32% nitrogen, and in a third situation a fertilizer that I've called Boost Max. If I'm going to calibrate for 28% nitrogen, I need to ensure that my 28% nitrogen work condition is selected. The reason it's important is as I perform the calibration adjustment factor will be saved with this work condition. This allows me to recall my work conditions in field for quick operational changeovers and ensure that my calibration adjustment factor is also controlled and adjusted with the work condition.